In this presentation, we will record a transaction related to government grants within QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Desktop. Here we are in our QuickBooks practice problem. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown and selecting the open windows list. We're first going to go to Excel and see what our objective will be. Within our Excel file, we're going to record a transaction related to the government grants. That's going to be the government grant to be used for education. In other words, there's going to be money granted from the government to the organization. However, that organization has to spend that money, or it's to be spended on education. Therefore, our objective then is to record the transaction, which is going to be an increase to the cash, and then an increase to something that's going to be contributions. We're going to call it here with donor restrictions. That's the key point. It's going to have the donor restrictions for it. Now, you might want to give the added information by another account, saying you have another income account rather than it going to the contributions with donor restrictions. You can break it out to the government grants with donor restrictions to get that more detail, or you can depend on other reports basically providing you that details, breaking out that information for what is included in the sales item. So then if we post this out, we're going to say that the cash will be increasing. I'm going to post it out now. I'm going to say cash is going to go up by the 159. And then the other side is going to go to the contributions with donor restrictions. Contributions with donor restrictions is going to be equal to the 159 here. And that's going to be, of course, increasing cash then from our prior point, increasing the revenue, but with the restriction for it. And that means that the net income is going up. This isn't a negative number here. This is a credits are winning on basically the net income side of things. So we want to record that. We're also going to be able to, or need to, track this information by job. So we're going to set up another job, because whenever we have something that's restricted, we're going to set up that job to be able to track that individual information. We're going to be able to set the classes as well, and the classes will help us to break out in a similar fashion as we see on the statement of activities for those without donor restrictions and those with donor restrictions. Note again, in this column, the items that have the donor restrictions then have multiple items with multiple different restrictions possibly in them. That's why in QuickBooks then, we can use the jobs to break out those individual items by job and track the restrictions and when those restrictions are met by the jobs that we will be setting up. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go back to the journal entry over here so we can see what the journal entry is. So there it is. And then we're going to go back to QuickBooks. And we'd like to use our sales receipt tab again so that we can see the donation and who the donation came from in our report. So I'm going to go to the sales receipt. That's going to be the donation. I'm going to call it the government one, and then say tab. That's going to be our customer. We're going to quick add, set that up. I'm going to set up the class then, and the class here is going to be once again restricted. So it's going to be in the restricted, and that'll put it in the restricted column as we make our profit and loss by class statement. I'm going to say this happens on the 4th. Going to tab through here, and then we're going to make another item, which I'm going to call government grant. So it's going to be a government grant tab. I'm going to save that or set it up. It's going to be a service item, and I'm going to type it all out, government grant here. And the income account that it's going to go to, once again, we could do like we had in the problem and put it to the same income account, which would be the contributions restricted. Or you might want to put it into the government grants and then say it's restricted. So we'll set up another account here to give a little bit more detail just on the actual profit and loss tab. We're going to set that up. It's going to be an income type of account. So that's the one we want. I'm going to say save and close. Looks good. We're going to say okay. There we have it. The amount then we're looking for will be the $159,000. So on the rate side, we're going to say 159,000, 159,000. What's this going to do when we record it? It's going to be increasing undeposited funds. The other side is going to be going into the revenue account that we just set up for the government grants account that we just set up with the item. So then we're going to say save and close, and then we're going to say yes. Note that we'll then have a little item over here. That means we got to deposit it in the bank from undeposited funds. Let's check that out first. We're going to go to the reports up top to see what that'll look like on the reports. Accounting and taxes, trial balance. Here's our trusty trial balance. And we're going to tab through here and say this is going to be as of 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. And then we see in undeposited funds, there's that 159. We set up our new income account, which is going to be the government grants restricted at the 159. So now we want to take it out of undeposited funds, put it into the checking account by actually depositing it. So if we go back to the home tab then, we're going to go to the record deposits. Going to check off that deposit that we just made that's in undeposited funds. We're going to say okay. We're going to make sure it's going to the checking account, not the clearing account. And then we're going to save and close that transaction. And yes. Back to the trial balance. In the open windows, we see now it's in the checking account. Again, if we double check on that, double click on it, then we see our deposits that we have made. If we double click on that, we will then go into that deposit. We see then the income information is going to be down below. Government grants. If we want to see then the source of the income, we can run our report up top. And this is a function of using the sales receipt form to do this. Reports up top. We're going to go to the sales down below. We want to go to the sales by customer detail. Sales by customer. We can then say 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. And there's going to be our sales by customer. Note also that this report is by default on an accrual basis. So that means that we are including the pledges here, which are on an accrual basis. If you want to change it to just the cash we have received, which could be necessary for basically tax reporting oftentimes, because it might be dependent on the cash that was received, you can change the basis to a cash basis, and you'll see it removes basically the pledges here from the items because they haven't yet given us the cash yet. If we go back to the accrual, then we're going to add that back in, and then there's our government up top. So I'm going to close this back out. We're then going to go to the reports up top. Let's then take a look at the company and financial and the profit and loss by class. If we tab through here, then we're going to say this is 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. There's going to be our profit and loss by class. If we look at the unrestricted then, or the restricted items, there's our 108 and there's our 159. I'm going to minimize this window so that we're focusing here on the restricted items. Now, of course, there's two things in the restricted items now. So now what we want to look at is at this by job. So the job information. And as we set up that form, we set up the particular job. Let's first go to the customer field up top. I'm going to go to the customer up top and the customer center. And then note that we put the government job up here. Now, I'd like to put it as a subcategory of the jobs so that our report will read from left to right and we'll have all the jobs that will be included in there. I'd also like to go into the jobs and put it as a job that's in progress so that we can filter it. So either of those two ways will work to help to filter the report. To do that, I'm going to put my cursor on this little diamond, and then I'm going to drag it down into the jobs area. Then I'm going to go back on that little diamond and I'm going to drag it to the right. So that's going to be a subcategory of the jobs field. Then I'm going to double click on the government pledge and I'm going to go to the job information. Job information. Within job information, I'm going to change the job status to in progress. So that's kind of like an open job, we're going to call it. And then I'm going to say okay. So there we have it. Now let's take a look at our profit and loss by job. I'm going to close this one out by selecting the X up top. We're going to X out of this one. We're going to go to the reports up top. We're going to go to the company and financial. And this time take a look at our profit and loss report by job. Profit and loss by job. Run the report as of 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. There's going to be our report. And here are our two jobs. So we have got the contributions restricted, and we're focusing here on those restricted items, and then the government grants restricted. So obviously if we were to minimize this, we would just see that job column. That job column then tying out to the 267,000. That amount, if we go to the profit and loss by class, then is going to be the amount that's in the class information for the restricted, which is going to be the 267,000. Now, obviously, when we see it by class, however, we don't have the detail. We don't have the detail of the two types of things that are included, and we can't track them individually when the conditions have then been met at some future point. Whereas if we go to the profit and loss by job, we can do so. We can say, hey, these two jobs are active here, and the conditions have not yet been met. If I can maximize this thing, it won't let me do it again. I'm going to run the report one more time. I'm going to go to the reports dropdown, company and financial, profit and loss by job, changing the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. So there we have it. So now we have the detail between the two jobs that we have, the pledge one and the government one. And then we can track when the conditions have been met and the related expenses related to them by job.